Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview Sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com. Welcome to the podcast. This is your co-host, Seth Greene. Today, I've got the good fortune to be with Brian Keane, who has done some amazing things. Started out as an Irish fitness entrepreneur, but has sold over 500,000 books, including The Fitness Mindset, The Keen Edge, Mastering the Mindset for Real Lasting Weight Loss, and one of the ones, obviously, I'm hoping we're going to dive in today, Rewire Your Mindset, Own Your Thinking, Control Your Actions, and Change Your Life. He's been in Balance, New, Daily Express, Women's Fitness, Daily Star, The Irish Mail, and everywhere else. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Seth, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Likewise. So let's go back in time just a little bit. And I know your story's in the books, obviously, but let's tease the folks. How did you get started?
Yeah, so my introduction into the world of entrepreneurship and business in general is a little bit different to most. I'm a qualified primary school teacher. So I went to university, went to college, and did what would have been a traditional path of 4-year degree, postgraduate, became an elementary school teacher, primary school teacher, walked into my first day teaching a 3rd grade class, and had that moment, Seth, where you're in front of a room. Not everybody has this, where there's 30 kids in front of you, 7-year-old children, and you think, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. This isn't my career path. This isn't my job. And the analogy I use in books was that it feels like I spent years climbing a ladder only to realize it was up against the wrong wall. And to cut a very long story short, I, for 2 years, worked as a primary school, elementary school teacher during the day, and I worked as a personal trainer in a gym at nighttime and at weekends and on holidays. And over the space of 2 years, built up a side hustle that I was able to move into that full time in 2015. My daughter was born, and I moved the business online. And over the last decade or so, 9 years in particular, I've written multiple best-selling books, as you've mentioned, which have done better than I ever dreamed or ever imagined. We've got one of the top health podcasts in the world when it comes to download numbers. We've got a separate consulting business where we work with business coaches, or we work with health and fitness entrepreneurs as business coaches. And we have a lot of juggling plates at the minute. So I've been very lucky over the last few years to go from elementary school teacher making my 25, 30K a year to having grown multiple businesses where I get to do the things I would do for free now. So yeah, it's been a wild journey over the last 12 years.
That is absolutely incredible. And obviously the longer version is in the books, and we'll tell people later where they can go get them. Let's go back in time to that moment when you said, hey, I'm going to do this fitness thing as a side hustle. Did you have, your background was in education. What made you decide on fitness? Did you have any expertise or qualifications at the time?
No, at the time I didn't. And it was a very interesting route that got me into it. So I was about 4 months into my first ever teaching job in that 3rd grade classroom. And I came home that Christmas to my mom and dad in the west of Ireland. I was teaching in London at the time. I'd lived in California in the Bay Area, moved to London, was working as a teacher, and came home that Christmas to the west of Ireland. And I was having a nice pity party for myself, Seth. I hated my job. I felt very unfulfilled in what I was doing. And I was having a real sob story, victim mentality. And I was in the kitchen, and my mom looked at me and she goes, okay, well, if you don't like what you're doing, do something else. But what would you do for free? And I sat there and I thought, very smart. Shout out to all the amazing moms and dads out there. And my mom has been my biggest fan, was at the beginning and still is to this day, thank God. And she put that question to me, and I thought, Seth, I would work in a gym for free. I was so unhappy in my role in what I was doing as a teacher and as an educator. I thought if I was sweeping the floor in a gym, I'd actually be happy because I loved working out. I played sport all my life. I would go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. It was a huge part of my life. Although I had no qualifications or accreditations at this point, it was a huge part of my personal life at the age of 22, 23. And I said, okay, I'm going to sign up to what was then a fitness instructor course, a very basic level 2 fitness instructor course. And I had the complete opposite feeling when I was in that classroom when I went back in January. It was a night school. So I was teaching during the day and I was going to night school to get my accreditations and qualifications. And I thought, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be working in the fitness industry. I'm supposed to be following my passion. I'm supposed to be doing this area. And again, following your passion gets a little bit of a bad rep depending on who you ask and who you talk to. But for me personally, it felt very aligned. And then over the next 18 months, I got my personal training, my sports nutrition accreditations, my qualifications in different areas around nutrition, around exercise physiology. And then I, over the space of 2 years, started to do that part-time as a side hustle and started to make more money part-time as a personal trainer than I was full-time as a teacher. And that's when I made the jump to set it up full and do it as my career. And again, long story short, the rest has been history, and I've been very fortunate with it up to this point.
Well, congratulations on all that. Let's talk about the next iteration, because it's one thing to replace your full-time income with what was your passion in terms of fitness and helping people lose weight, lose fat, work out. When did you realize, hey, not just am I making enough to quit my day job, but when does this turn into, oh my God, this is a real business way beyond what I ever imagined?
The first month that I made more money in a month as a trainer than I did in a year as a teacher. That was the real eye opener for me, because in 2014 I said, okay, I'm going to make a full-time go at this. And I moved back from London to the west of Ireland. I actually moved back in with my mum and dad at the time. My sister gave me her old little Toyota, 1991 Toyota, that would get me to and from the gym. It was one of those cars that you close the front door, all 4 windows would fall down. And I knew I was directionally correct. My ladder was against the right wall, but I had no books, no social media, no podcast. Nobody knew who I was. The only advantage I had as a trainer in fitness at the time was I had ironed out my kinks in terms of my practical ability to coach people and get them results. I'd worked that out in London, so I was good at my craft. Just I had a marketing problem. You know this better than anybody. You know, I've seen your stuff with Dan Kennedy, etc. The awareness, the brand, the marketing, all of that is so important. I had none of that in 2014. And because I was getting good results with clients in the gym, it snowballed. I said, I'll give myself 6 months. If I haven't made a full-time living out of this, having moved country where nobody knows me, I'll go back and get a teaching job. I had a plan B. I had that, is it Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the 2 most addictive things in the world are a weekly paycheck and heroin. And that's where I was at. I was very addicted to it at the time. And I said, I can go back and give myself a plan B. But over 2 months, I actually ended up getting waiting lists where I had to hire other trainers underneath me and bring them under my umbrella to clear those waiting lists. And then how we scaled 2 years later was we moved online, which again, with courses and programs and a lot more leverage, you're able to scale it in a much more efficient way for higher revenue, more time, etc., which put a big focus on, in that life balance of lifestyle entrepreneur and making sure that I have a great living, but I also am doing things I would do for free, working with people I would work with for free, and being able to jump out of bed every morning with what I'm doing. And when I was making that transition first and building it out, it took off faster than I expected it to. And as a result, you just course correct and you build and you grow. And from 2014 onwards, again, I went broke twice. I probably should mention that. This is attempt number 3. Like, I did go broke twice from not reading the books, not listening to the podcast, not working with the coaches, not having the mentors, and making my own mistakes. You know, it's the Brandon Bull quote that the sharp people learn from their mistakes, the really sharp ones learn from the mistakes of others. I was learning from my own mistakes, which led me to go broke twice. But by the 3rd attempt, I started working with business coaches. I was reading books like, I know you've got the one on the podcast domination, which again, game changing when you're looking, because I was reading that in the preparation for when you come on my online business podcast, that shows people how to cut through the learning curve, learn from the people who are at the top of their fields when it comes to podcasting, when it comes to business. I didn't do that in the early stages, and by 2014, 2015, 2016, I had started to, and it's not a coincidence that I had a massive trajectory in a positive direction from that point onwards.
That is awesome. So that's iteration 2, scaling and making it a much larger business. When did distinction 3 happen when you said, hey, what worked for me can not only help other fitness professionals, but other business owners as well?
One of the things that I've tried to do over the years, because I'm the first to admit that I'm not the smartest person and the most intellectual person ever. And to try and figure out what my audience wants would be too much of a difficult job. So I basically get them to tell me what they want. And then I course correct the business around that. So when I wrote the first book, The Fitness Mindset, which has sold over 350,000 copies at the time of recording, that book in particular, my first one, did better than I ever dreamed, ever imagined. But the way I wrote that book was based on, I did two things. I wrote the first half as fitness. I wrote the second half as mindset. So I split them into two books. So the first half is everything you need to know about getting in shape: training, nutrition, hydration, sleep, etc. The second half is all mindset: setting the right goals, failure is feedback, working around self-sabotage, getting back on track when you fall off, the things that my clients were struggling with. So I used my clients as a reference point to write that book. But also when I wrote it, at the time, it was 2016 when Facebook organic reach was very high. So I wrote out sections of that book and I posted it to Facebook. And the ones that got the most likes, comments, and shares, I took back, rewrote, and put it into the final edit of the book. So I actually crowdsourced that book effectively and used what was connecting with my audience. I had things in there on insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity that I thought as a nutritionist was a must for a fitness book. And then I would post it on Facebook and it would get crickets. And then I would put up something about anxiety and stress and it would have 1,000 shares. And I was like, okay, I need to take that back and I need to put that into the book. So I was using my audience and I was crowdsourcing my audience to show me where I need to go with business. And then in 2018, I started getting personal trainers, Pilates instructors, yoga instructors, physiotherapists messaging me about business, going, how did you grow with social media? How did you scale? How did you design a course that you've got on Evergreen? How do you run a launch model? How do you sell a high ticket offer? People were asking me these questions, and then I designed and set up a business consultancy separate for people that were struggling with those areas. So I just used my audience, I used my crowd, what I was being asked, to create solutions to the problems that they already had.
So teacher to fitness instructor to entrepreneur to helping other fitness instructors to applying the same principles for other business owners. I count 3 or 4 different iterations, pivots, evolutions. What's next?
Over the last 18 months, something I've been doing a lot more of, because I love writing books. I have a new one coming out either in December or January, which is another mindset book. It's called Rewriting Your Story: The 7 Habits to Effectively Rewriting Your Story and Changing Your Narrative with the Things that Hold You Back in Your Life. I'm doing more in that space. So I do a lot of corporate wellness talking now and speeches and going to events where I'm unpacking these mindsets and narratives and stories that hold people back, either in their personal life, their business life, or their fitness life. There's a lot of crossover here in terms of the narratives and stories that hold people back. I've been doing a lot more of that over the past 12 and 18 months. And I've been doing a lot more stuff with my community. So I just got back. I climbed and summited Kilimanjaro in Africa last Monday. And
Oh
I just
my
got
God,
back.
congratulations. And we could have rescheduled.
No, not at all. Not at all. Again, delighted to be here. But I got to bring a group of my followers up to summit that. So I've done a lot of solo challenges myself. I've ran through the Sahara. I've ran through the Arctic. I've done 100-mile ultramarathons. I've done a lot of solo physical activities that have stressed me and allowed me to push myself physically. This was my first time bringing a group of my followers somewhere so that we could all have this team goal that we're working towards. So we were able to summit Kilimanjaro in Africa together. That's going to be something I'm doing more of now. I feel at a stage in my business, very grateful, very lucky that I don't really have to worry about money anymore. I don't have to worry about finances anymore. I'm able to give back more. So the next couple of years will be focused around that: more service, more community aspect, and doing things that basically raise up the confidence level and nearly the passion and inspiration level of the people that are following me.
That is beautiful. I love that. I mean, you've achieved so much in so many different ways. What's your biggest challenge now?
My biggest challenge is making sure that I'm still jumping out of bed every morning. Something I really pride myself on, Seth, is I've got a very good life balance with my work. Now, I absolutely love what I do. I run two businesses, a fitness business and a consulting business. I've got a team on the fitness business. They do a lot of the heavy lifting. I run most of the consulting business myself. But I've got my daughter, I've got my friends, I've got my family. I've got that good work-life balance. I prioritize my training, my meditation, my mental health. And as long as I'm able to continually jump out of bed every morning to be excited to what I'm doing, I feel I'm on the right path. And then everything that kind of comes from it is nearly secondary. So I have targets, financial goals, fitness goals. I plan to do an Ironman next year, an Ironman triathlon. Like, I plan to bring a group up Machu Picchu in Peru. Like, I've got these other goals that I've set, but as long as it ultimately comes back to me being super happy doing it, I think that's the sustainability, that's the longevity, that's what gives you the competitive advantage, because you're doing things that feel like work to other people that don't feel like work to you. And as long as I feel directionally correct with that every day, I feel I'm going to do quite well with it.
Amen to that. Your passion is obvious. What do you like best about what you're doing?
The fact that you can cut through the noise online. I love that question, because fitness in particular, and this is true for business as well. That's what I love what you and Kevin are doing with Sharkpreneur in particular, and the books that you write, that you're able to kind of cut through the noise. You're basically, there's all this external noise with business and people get confused, and you're going straight to the source of, this is how you need to think, this is how you market, this is how you promote. That's so important. I try and do an equivalent with fitness, where people overcomplicate fitness with nutrition, with supplements, with training, and I try and simplify it and break it down. And when I get a message from somebody that goes, I thought it was more complicated than that, but you've made it simple for me, I understand and I grasp that. That's one of my favorite things that I get to do.
That is absolutely awesome. I love that. Talk a little bit about the next book.
So Rewriting Your Story is a follow-up to Rewire Your Mindset. So Rewire Your Mindset is my second book. It's personally my favorite book, because it's the one that I get the best feedback from in terms of the positive change it has on people's lives. So Rewire Your Mindset is all about those limiting belief systems that you have, feeling the fear and doing it anyways, having that proper balance so that you don't get too extreme in one direction, where you can have something I live my life by is that micro imbalance for macro balance. Like, there'll be times when you have to put your head down and you have to grind out a launch for business, or you have to put your head down and grind out your training for, you know, an event or a wedding or something that you want to look really good for, but you're having that micro imbalance. But over the space of 6, 12, 18 months, 5 years, you have a balance there that you're able to jump in and out of different things. Rewire Your Mindset is very much along that. And when I was writing a follow-up, it actually started as a book on mental resilience, because I was getting asked a lot about that with my audience. People going, look, how do you run through the Arctic, or how do you run through the Sahara, or how do you run a 100-mile ultra marathon without stopping? People were asking me these questions about mental resilience. So I started to write a book about that, but it evolved because the reality was mental resilience and grit aren't necessarily something that, yes, you can learn it, but there's people out there speaking on those topics. Your extreme athletes, your David Goggins of the world, your ultra endurance athletes, you know, people I've had on my podcast, etc. And I started to question that actually it's not the act itself that's the problem. It's the story and the narrative that's holding you back, and building the right daily habits in place that allow you to question that narrative so that you're able to jump out of bed every morning. You're able to feel the fear and do it anyways. You're able to build the self-discipline and condition yourself to do the things you have to do regardless of how you feel. They're all learned skills. So rewriting your story is questioning all those belief systems, those narratives that are holding you back, so that you're actually able to channel it into fitness or into business or into relationships or into another area of your life. So I wanted to write a follow-up to Rewire Your Mindset, so that it's basically a book for everyone that read that, but it will also hopefully connect with those outside who struggle with that voice between their head, that I can't, you know, that's not for me. All the stuff I struggle with as a teacher, as somebody that doesn't identify as a runner but does ultra marathons, like, oh, I don't run, I'm not a runner, I'm not built to run, or I can't set up a business, I can't become an entrepreneur, none of my family members did that, I wouldn't know where to start. They're all stories that hold people back. So I wanted to unpack those bit by bit and give solutions to them through the book.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate your time. We know it's incredibly valuable. for our folks who are watching and listening, where can we go to get all of those amazing things?
Thanks so much, Seth. Yeah, so the book's available everywhere. Amazon's probably the easiest place for those in North America. Amazon.com, The Fitness Mindset, Rewire Your Mindset, The Keen Edge. The new book will be out in either December or January. And then I'm available on everything. Brian Keane Fitness on all the platforms for fitness content. And then the Online Business Podcast is my business podcast, which I'll have you on to unpack all things podcast domination in a couple of weeks as well. So really looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, we greatly appreciate your time. This has been Seth Greene with Brian Keane from briankeane.com. Brian, thanks again for joining us.
Pleasure is all mine. Thanks so much again.
Thanks, everybody, for watching or listening. We'll talk to you or see you next time.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.